Hello everyone, and greetings from El Paso, Texas. My name is Efren Pulido, and I am currently in the MLSX 5331 Leadership Communications class. Obviously, because if you're watching this, then you're taking the class as well. I am also working on my master's in leadership studies. My undergrad was in kinesiology with a concentration of exercise science. I am currently in the UTEP athletic training program, and after I complete this master's program, I intend to pursue a career in athletic training. And ideally, I'd like to work for a high school setting, which is why I think this master's program will really come in handy when I get into that high school setting. Now, that being said, I will be discussing a concept from the assigned literature, The Secret Language of Leadership by Stephen Denning. And I'll be relating it to my profession in the way that I interpreted the concepts. And I hope you guys will find these next 10 minutes enjoyable and informative. What I will be discussing is a communication model utilized in the book, which consists of first, getting the attention of your audience, second, stimulating desire in your audience, and lastly, reinforcing with reason to your audience. Now, let's get started. The book mentions a common communication model, which is what I would use, and I'm sure a lot of you will use this as well. This model consists of first stating the problem at hand, second, analyzing the possible options for this particular problem, and finally, out of all those options, you recommend one that is a solution. Now, this seems like the most logical way because when there's a problem, you address it, then you discuss it, and then you recommend the solution. And I feel like this is done in everyday life tasks, especially with just small tasks that you come upon yourself. I'm sure you follow this logical way. But according to Denning, this method will lead to failure if you're trying to convince an audience to change from something that they normally do. Now, Denning mentions that this occurs due to something called confirmation bias. This phenomenon is described as brain activity fueled by emotion, in which will strongly stand for their original beliefs. It is even said that proving the contradictions to their beliefs will only make them strongly believe their beliefs even more, because this is fueled by emotion rather than reason. Therefore, Denning mentions a new communication model, which is a method that I mentioned at the beginning, which is, number one, get the attention of the audience, two, stimulate a sense of desire towards your idea, and three, reinforce your idea. Now, the first thing you want to be wondering is, how do you get attention? Well, Denning mentions a few principles to follow in order to grab the attention of your audience. First, you want to say something out of the ordinary, something they aren't used to hearing. Second, engage the audience's emotion when using this attention grabber. Third, it should be personal to the audience, and you should understand your audience's story and, a lot about your audience. Fourth, the way that you get the attention must be relevant to the idea that you're presenting. Fifth, you need to get a feel for how many people need to change their minds and determine how much time you should be spending getting the attention. Because if there's people that already had their minds changed, then you don't want to spend so much time trying to get their attention. So lastly, Denning suggests that the attention getter should be negative due to the fact that psychological studies have shown a greater influence in negative emotions rather than positive. So now, those are the principles of the attention getter, but now the question is, what is the attention getter? Now, Denning mentions a list of tools to use in order to get attention, but for time's sake, I am going to choose one for this discussion. And the tool that I feel that is the most relevant in my field is telling the audience a story about their problem. For this method, it is important to know the problems that the audience is enduring. And use this as a springboard to get their attention by telling them a story about how much more serious their problems really are. So, when it comes to my profession, telling a story like this is almost an everyday thing. So, an example for me would be when an athlete comes into the training room complaining of tightness and cramping that is hindering their performance. That lets me know that the problem that they're dealing with is a lack of hydration and a lack of stretching. So now I know how to address it. And this tells me that they do not like to drink water and they don't like to stretch. So I'll use these tools and this knowledge into making a story that I believe will get their attention. And it'll go something like this. Did you know that a lack of water and electrolytes will cause your muscles to cramp, and not stretching will create tightness all around? And the combination of the two will result in a muscle strain or a tear. When I was in high school, I worked very hard to become a starter for varsity. I would get there before school started, work out, still work out as hard as I can during practice, and when school was over and practice was over, the gym was open, I was still in the gym working out. I worked very hard, but I was just like you. I would get tight and I wouldn't want to do the maintenance that my body needed. And, one day out of nowhere, I pulled my hamstring muscles, and it just created a series of unfortunate events where I just kept straining my hamstring nonstop, and I ended up missing out my senior year completely. I didn't get to play any sports during my senior year, and I missed out on any opportunity to go to college and play. So if I would have just done the maintenance that I needed to for my body, it could have been a totally different story for me. So that's kind of how my story would go. And my goal here would be, I want them to drink more water, I want them to stretch, I want them to do the maintenance that their body needs. And the second part of the model is stimulating desire. At this point, you should have gotten their attention. Now it's time to persuade them, and get them on board with your idea. Denning offers a few principles to consider when you are stimulating desire. First, the idea should be worth their while. It should have meaning and it should be relevant to them. Second, it should be memorable, but still keep it short and sweet. You don't want to get them too confused with, complex ideas. Third, once again, you need to know your audience because you need to get a sense of what their idea is, and the idea that you're presenting should almost come across as their own idea. Fourth, there must be a role for the audience that you're addressing. Fifth, stay positive and enthusiastic and ensure that there is some positive emotion being introduced in this conversation you're having with them. Sixth, again, you must know your audience because not only does it have to be positive, but it has to be positive specifically to that audience. Seventh, your idea should come in the form of a story because stories are the easiest relatable type of motivation to human beings. Eighth, you need to try to generate a new story in the brain of this audience when you're presenting this idea. Again, Denning mentions a list of tools that you can utilize to stimulate desire, but I'll be using the tool that I feel is most relatable to the story that I just presented and to my field, which is using a positive story. And I feel like this will relate because I just used a negative story to get the attention, which is where I saw the problem of my athlete, and now I'm going to do a positive story to get the fear away but still kind of motivate them towards my idea. And I'm going to try to convert that negative into a positive. So again, after getting the athlete's attention, I will now try to stimulate their desire with a positive story, and it will go a little something like this. Now, my story doesn't have to be your story. My purpose in life now is to prevent my story from ever being anybody else's story. I'm here to give you the tools to succeed. Everyone who's ever come to me with your situation no longer has a problem, and now they are performing at the top of their game. Just ask your former teammates who are now playing in the NFL and ask them, how often do you maintenance your body? How often do you drink water? How often do you stretch? And if you take care of yourself, you too soon will be playing at the highest level in the nation. All it takes is just some constant maintenance of your body, just drinking water and stretching. That's all it takes. Now, I believe that this will stimulate their desire because, it's not a big change in their life, and I just need them to stay positive and know that, this little change will turn them into something that they idolize in a sense. Now, the last step is reinforcing your idea with reason. To achieve this, you need to deliver your reasons with an emotional punch, and to do so, it has to be a story. We're keeping the same pattern. Story, story, story. Now, this story that you present has a couple principles that must follow, which are: the story should take place in the present or the immediate future. The story should detail how the future will unfold. The story should be short and sweet. The story should be a neutral tone, because we got the attention with a negative story, we stimulated desire with a positive story, and now this one's going to be neutral. Okay? So the story should also be easy to understand, nothing too complex. You don't want to get them lost in these points that you're making. And it should be a relatable story that relates to the previous stories you just presented. As I said, we're keeping the pattern alive, same story, one big long story. So therefore, a few ways to tell your final story are listed in the Denning's book, but I'm going to choose the one that I feel is the most relevant, as I've been saying, and the way I feel is going to be the most relevant is to tell a story of how it will work. And my story will go a little bit something like this. So this is how it's going to work. Nothing has to change. You can continue playing, you can continue doing what you love. All you have to do is make sure that you're consuming water. I'll even give you a water bottle so you can measure how much water that you're drinking. And I just want you to stretch 2 times a day minimally. Okay? And if you ever need help with anything, just come in here and I'll stretch you myself. We'll get you on these tools, roll out, get you loosened up. All the things you need are here for you. So, ideally, I would want my athlete to be able to change their lifestyle for the better. And what I'm asking them is not a big lifestyle change per se, but because of my profession, I know that just these little changes are actually a big lifestyle change physiologically to them. So that concludes my presentation, and I hope that was able to clear up any issues you were having with that communication model. And if you weren't having any issues with it, hopefully you just enjoyed my version of it, my interpretation of it. Thank you.